Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jim Whale, and this is episode number 56 of the Sports Consiglieres Podcast. Jerry has a lot of family events going on. His son's birthday today, so I'm going to be doing this episode solo. But our next guest is currently on assignment up at West Point. He is also a professor of mathematics up at Seton Hall University. He grew up in Hoboken, wrote a couple books. He is a Babe Ruth aficionado and also is going to have an event on Sunday at the Yogi Berra Museum. So it's our pleasure to introduce Father Gabriel Costa. Father, thank you very much for coming on the show, and really a pleasure for us. I mean, not too often you see a priest who's a mathematician and also serve in our country up at West Point. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, sir. I'm honored to be here.
All right. So just going back from your childhood, I mean, I guess you're Hudson County, grew up in Hoboken.
I grew up in Hoboken, that's right.
And then I guess you ended up going to Hoboken High School. Just talk
That's
about
right.
a little bit about your youth and then how baseball kind of formed your life. Father, I don't know if you could. I got you on. I guess to the right. You're a double screen. There you go. I can see you better. Yeah, I can see you better there. I want to see your face.
Okay. Thank you.
So, yeah. So just talk a little bit about your childhood growing up in Hudson County and your I guess being with the New York Yankees and how you got inspired about with Babe Ruth.
Okay, sir. As you said, I grew up. I have a younger brother, Gerard, who's a psychologist. My father was a longshoreman, and my mother was a homemaker. And actually, I went from the kindergarten all through a doctorate, all in the square mile of Hoboken. I'm a very proud graduate of the schools of Hoboken. When I was about 10 years old, my father, I'll never forget, it was a Sunday afternoon and he had to work the next day, but he was looking in the papers and he said, "Hey, Gabe, the Babe Ruth story is on tonight, but it's on it was on like at 12:30, and and we all had to go to bed. So he says, go to bed early, and Mom will wake you up." Well, that was the show with William Bendix, and I'll never forget. It had a profound influence on me, and I saw the whole thing, the whole William Bendix Babe Ruth story, and it was right after that I said, boy, this is someone I want to learn about. I had just gone into the Yankees. I started following them when I was 10 years old in 1958, and the Yankees were down 3-1 in the World Series to the Milwaukee Braves, but they pulled it out.
Okay.
The Yankees pulled it out, and because my name was Gabe, which rhymed with Babe,
Okay.
I thought it was kind of a natural thing.
Yeah.
What I learned too is that my mother told me I was actually born left-handed, but in those days they changed you.
Yeah.
So I didn't have any great baseball skills, but what little skills I had, I totally screwed up when I tried to then throw left-handed, which I couldn't do. But I became a little bit of a left-handed hitter. But that was it with the Yankees, and it was love at first sight. And I remember that first lineup in 1958, and my brother and I went to our first game in 1960. Believe it or not, it was in September, and we saw Ted Williams in his last month, and we actually saw Ted Williams hit a home run. I'll never forget that. But the most impressive thing was when I saw the green facade. I never saw anything that green. And you walked into Yankee Stadium and it was there. I mean, it was like unbelievable. It was like going to heaven. And I kept looking at right field and I said, that's where Babe Ruth played. That's where Babe Ruth played. So anyway, that was it.
Yeah, well, a lot of people of your generation said that because it was black and white TV. So until they walked into the studio, to stadium and actually see it, and left hand, I took Latin in high school. I guess it probably saved me in a couple ways, but left the sinister. So I know in going to
Yeah,
going to Catholic school, they made you make sure your mate were right. But
right.
yeah, from there, um, you end up going, Hoboken High School, and then you went to Stevens Tech.
Yes, sir.
I guess you had a knack with numbers, and Stevens Tech is still a premier institution. So,
Right,
just
right.
talk about your time, and obviously you're probably commuting. You probably can walk right
Right,
through.
right. That's exactly. In fact, a couple of times we lived in the projects in the southwest corner of Hoboken. Stevens was in the northeast corner. And at times I would go back and forth twice a day. I'd walk back and forth. But I had one teacher in particular, Mr. Rodriguez, at Hoboken High School, who was not only a great math teacher, but he instilled confidence um, and uh, and I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship. My intention was to be a civil engineer. This is long before I thought about becoming a priest. But in my first year, I said, I'd like to be an engineer, but I really love mathematics. And so I decided to major in math, and I never regretted it. In fact, it was because of my math education. Even when I was in the seminary, I wasn't smarter than the other guys, but it gave me an advantage. And then eventually I was able to marry the math and the baseball into sabermetrics, and it was a lot of fun. It's been a
Yeah.
lot of fun.
So, when did you kind of get called to the priesthood? I mean, I guess you went in.
Okay.
Obviously, I don't think the diocese is going to take is going to. Well, you went there for free, but I don't think they're going to pay you to go to. Uh, uh, like I guess they want you to serve in different capabilities, but
Right, right,
like when did you kind of answer the call
right.
to go into the priesthood?
I graduated Stevens in 1970, and then I stayed on 2 more years for my master's degree. But and I almost got I almost got married, but that's
Oh, okay,
another
all right,
story. But at the end, after I got my master's in '72, I was going to start my doctorate, but I said, I think I'd like to work a little bit outside of just studying. So I took a job in a high school, an all girls Catholic high school in Irvington, New Jersey, and
okay,
at the end of that year, it was a great job, and I enjoyed it, and I still keep in touch with some of my former students. In fact, I did their marriages and baptisms, but uh, what I did is I said, I gotta face this thing about priesthood. Um, I had started reading when I was 18 about a life of Saint Francis of Assisi, and I
okay,
was born and raised Catholic. But after I after I read a book on Saint Francis, I started looking at Jesus in another way, a different way, a fuller way, and so I decided that I was going to look into the priesthood. So this was like 1973,
okay,
and so I was 25 years old, and I spent 2 years with a group of Franciscans, and then I decided to go into the major seminary. So I went into the major seminary in 1975, and I was ordained a priest in 1979. And my intention was to be a parish priest. I mean, I love being a parish priest. I mentioned a high school teacher, Mr. Rodriguez. At the same time, there was a priest who was named Father Francis, by the way, from Our Lady of Grace in Hoboken. And those two people, the priest and the math teacher, really influenced me. And so I was ordained a priest thinking I was going to be a parish priest. But after a year in a parish, my archbishop said, look, you've got a master's degree in math. I want you to go back and get your doctorate. I'm going to put you at Seton Hall University.
okay.
And so that's what happened. I went to Seton Hall University, and in 1980, I was ordained in 79. 1980, I went to Seton Hall. And I've been here ever since. But after I got tenure, I was invited to give a talk at West Point, and they asked me to teach here. I'm speaking at West Point now. So my university gave me basically an extended sabbatical, which will be ending at the end of this calendar year because I'm 77 and it's time to
Okay.
go home.
Okay. Hey, Father, could you do me a favor? I'm getting half of your face if you get like,
Oh, gee, I
yeah, yeah,
forgot. I'm
yeah.
sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. That's all right. I mean, you got some interesting stuff there. But I think as far as cybermetrics, I think you wrote a book on cybermetrics, and I think you had the first university accredited
Right.
cybermetrics program. So, I
Sabermetrics.
said,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
you know,
Okay.
what's the guy James from
Bill
Moneyball,
James.
Bill
Right.
James. Have you ever any
Right.
interactions with them? And
Right.
like and how did you get involved with
Sure.
that? And how was your
Right.
love for baseball and your love for mathematics?
Right.
How did that get melded together? So
Okay, here's what happened. Actually, I've been fortunate to co-author a number of books. One guy was Dr. John Sockman from John J. Sockman, and I'll explain why I'm meant to make a point to that at Seton
okay,
Hall. The other guy was a former Lieutenant Colonel, Dr. Mike Huber from Eulenberg College, and we co-authored a number of books. But what happened one night, I went out with two other priests. We went to an Italian restaurant for dinner, and I thought I had decaf coffee. Well, I didn't. I couldn't sleep that night. This is about 1985,
okay,
and so I get home to Seton Hall. Now there was no internet then or anything like that. So I started looking basically at a book called Total Baseball, which is like a baseball encyclopedia.
okay,
And I started looking at Babe Ruth. And I did some calculations, back of the envelope calculations, and this still gets me. That Babe Ruth out homered teams 90 times. If there is a moment,
yeah,
an insight, a point where like you solve your doctoral dissertation, where you cracked the nut, it was then. So, and it came that in 1920, Babe Ruth out homered 14 of a possible 15 other teams. He had 54 home runs. And subsequently, a cadet pointed out to me when he did all the permutations, Babe Ruth actually out homered 11 pairs of teams. So in 1920, his 54 home runs, if you took all the combinations, Babe Ruth not only out homered 14 of a possible 15 other teams, because there were only 8 teams in the American League, 8 teams in the National League, and you can't out homer your own team. But he also out homered 11 pairs of teams. That was the moment that I said, there's something here. And then
okay,
I looked to see if anyone else did anything like that. Absolutely not. So with John T. Sockman, his father, John J. Sockman, was the
okay,
chair of the department. And he, Dr. Dan Gross and Dr. Jane Norton at Seton Hall, I went to them and they basically argued for the sabermetrics course. So the first time was offered was in the winter section of 1988. And it was Bill James, as you correctly bring
yeah,
up. He was the one who took the word saber from the Society for American Baseball Research, which started, I believe, in 1971. And he took that acronym and defined sabermetrics as the search for objective knowledge or objective truth about baseball. And that was it. And that was it. And in fact, I was talking to someone in the Society for American Baseball Research, and he asked me, "Well, why did you come up with this course?" I says, "Well, I always wanted to see if there was some objective way that I could prove that Babe Ruth was the greatest player ever." And he said, "Did you ever doubt that?" I
yeah,
said, "No, I never doubted it." And then he was the one who said to me, which I've called uh, the fundamental theorem of sabermetrics, and that is, if you do an analysis and Babe Ruth is not the best, there's something wrong with the analysis. And and sir, I don't want to get off on a tangent,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah,
I've,
yeah,
I've done, and in fact, I've asked some cadets to do some research on this,
yeah.
and I'm trying to be as objective as possible. But if you compare Babe Ruth with Ohtani, Ohtani's a great player. But when you look at the numbers, I mean, Ruth was the absolute best. And what Otani's done is great. But Ruth had two 20-game seasons. He had the record for 29 and two-thirds consecutive scoreless innings in World Series play. He had 9 shutouts, which was a record that Ron Guidry tied for left-handers in the American League. He was amazing. But the home runs were just literally off the charts.
Yeah.
Anyway,
And one thing about Babe Ruth, some say he saved baseball because
right,
you talking 1920, he
right,
coming off the Black Sox
yeah,
scandal with the
exactly,
gambling, so he saved baseball. So,
exactly.
but when we spoke on the phone, I guess it's probably about a month ago or so, you said your second Yankee baseball player they think is probably the best is Yogi Berra. So So, you're probably going to get a lot of debate on that because you have Mickey Mantle, Joe
Right.
DiMaggio.
Well,
So,
yeah,
what's your case
yeah,
on with Yogi Berra?
yeah. I think I said I'm not sure. First off, I saw Berra play, and I remember him, and I remember Casey Stengel saying about Berra when I think Stengel had retired. He said the 3 greatest players he ever managed with the Yankees were DiMaggio, Berra, and Mantle in that order. I
Mhm.
think, though, I said, and Berra was a great player, but I think I said that after Babe Ruth, I think Yogi Berra is probably the most loved and
Uh,
well-known player. But I would pick Berra, maybe not as the greatest hitting catcher, but I would take Berra as the greatest all-around catcher. He won pennants in 2 leagues. He won 10 world championships as a player.
yeah,
And he was smart. He knew baseball. Oh, and the thing about Berra, and I'm sure people have talked about this for years. I gotta believe that Berra, the way Berra argued after that Jackie Robinson steal of home
yeah,
plate, Berra, I don't think was the type of person who would lie. I don't think he could have gotten that angry unless he really felt that was that he was out. But that's a whole other thing.
yeah. Well, I think his granddaughter had that. Um,
Right.
but and some of the players, I guess, when they wanted to get his goat, they would say, was he
Yeah.
out or was he safe? So,
Right.
I mean, but I mean, and I think that there's a lot there because like he was MVP. The league is probably a very good offensive catcher, and then, but he wasn't really considered probably who knows why, but he really wasn't considered in that top echelon. And that was the kind of basis of the film from her granddaughter of that
Yeah.
documentary.
Yeah. I think though that when you look at everything now, I think that Bill Dickey taught him about catching. I think at one time Berra had the record for the most consecutive games without an error. I think it was 148. um, Winning 3 MVP awards, winning all of that stuff. I mean, he was just, he was there at the right place at the right time. And I guess it's a chicken egg thing. Did Berra make the team or the team make Berra?
Yeah,
But it was
yeah.
like wherever he went, I mean, he just brought things with him. Uh,
Did you ever meet Yogi Berra? I know.
yeah,
I think Babe Ruth.
yeah,
I know and you even wrote some articles in Saber about Babe Ruth itself, and I guess his religion. Let's touch on Babe Ruth. He didn't really have the most upbringing, but like, what was you wrote an article about Babe Ruth and his basically foundation
right.
in
Yeah,
his faith. So just talk a
yeah,
little bit about
yeah.
that. You wrote an article in Saber magazine about that.
Right. There was maybe 5 or so years ago a book about Babe Ruth, and they asked me to do something about his Catholicity.
Okay.
Um, he was raised, he was baptized, I believe, a Lutheran, but as we know, he grew up as a German Lutheran, but he wound up at St. Mary's Industrial School, which was not an orphanage. There were orphans there, but he was listed as an incorrigible. And
So,
and the brothers, the Zavarian brothers, were just unbelievable. And he picked one brother that I think he even emulated the way he walked, Brother Matthias. He said that Brother Matthias was the greatest man he ever met, and he grew to love him as the greatest man he ever met. And that as far as his, in Babe Ruth's, I guess his autobiography, written with Considine, I think it was Bob Considine, he said, I'm just as proud of my being at St. Mary's as any Harvard man, and if anyone would knock St. Mary's, I'd be happy to pop him on the Beezer. As Ruth said. Now the thing is with Ruth, he apparently was baptized again. I imagine it was at St. Mary's Industrial School by the brothers or one of the chaplains there. It was a priest. And so he, there's a story about him that he, I don't know if they were in Chicago or whatever, but the Yankees must have been, no, it was on a weekend. There were no night games. So Ruth went out on a Saturday night with, I don't know, alone or whatever, and he did whatever Babe Ruth did. But he got so he, after being out all night, presumably drinking, and only God knows what else he did. But the story goes, he went to the hotel where the Yankees were staying. He woke up all the Catholic Yankees. He dragged them all off to Mass. So now he's at Mass, and the Mass is in Latin, of course, and the collection plate comes along with the basket. He throws in a $50 or $100 bill. And Tony Lazzari, said, not too low. He says, "What are you doing, babe? Paying for last night's sins." But he really,
Yeah.
it was an amazing man. I think what you saw with Ruth was what you got. I think it was Waite Hoyt who said people could get angry at Ruth, but I didn't know anyone who didn't really like him. I don't think he had a prejudiced bone in his body. I think he just liked having a good time. He was like an uncaged animal when he had gotten out, and I think he enjoyed life. It was a truncated life. I think he was very, very generous. And when you compare him and Gehrig, they were both German. Gehrig, I think, loved Ruth. Gehrig was, I guess, 8 years younger. I think Ruth made him a lot of money on barnstorming tours, and there was definitely a falling out, and most authors attribute it to Gehrig's mother making a comment about Ruth's daughter. Now, that's the whole thing. Ruth had two daughters. He adopted Claire's daughter, who was the older one, and the younger daughter, Dorothy, he said it was biologically his daughter. Now, I met his daughter's daughter, Linda Ruth Tassetti. She looks just like Babe Ruth. Yeah. So I can't believe that her mother was not Babe's biological daughter. But the story goes that Gehrig's mother made a comment about the other daughter. I can't think of her name off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
No, that's right.
And anyway, so apparently that caused a little bit of a problem. And then I don't know if this was tabloids, it says, but on Lou Gehrig Day, when Ruth hugged Gehrig, then all was forgiven. So
yeah, well, that's a story. But I mean, are you surprised that the Yankees didn't give him a shot on managing?
Oh yeah. I think he deserved the shot. I think the owners had a love-hate relationship with Ruth. They loved the fact that Ruth brought in people. and he drew people, but he also created an updraft. So he made 80,000 for top salary. So you might have a guy say, "Well, I'm not Babe Ruth, but I'm a quarter as good as Babe Ruth, so I want to get $20,000." And the owners, as you well know, even Jacob Rupert, but Comiskey and so many other ones,
Mhm.
they were cheap, but didn't have the money or whatever, and it was no union, of course. So once Ruth started going down, and I don't know, he deserved the shot. And I think it hurt him. I think it hurt him an awful lot. And the fact that they didn't retire his number until 2 months before he died was insane.
Yeah.
It was just unbelievable. And he knew baseball. He knew every aspect of baseball. They said he couldn't control himself, so how could he control him? I thought that was such a weak argument. You've had so many other players, great stars, Ty Cobb, Speaker, others who managed. Root certainly deserved a shot.
Yeah, yeah. I guess we'll never know. But and getting back to the original question before we kind of change channels with uh, Babe Ruth, Yogi Berra. Did you ever meet Yogi throughout
Oh
your
yeah,
tenure?
right. One of
Well,
the professors I had at Seton in the seminary was Father Charles Guzma, who was pastor of a church in um, right by Veronis, Cedar Grove.
okay.
Anyway, it was the day before Ash Wednesday, and he called me. He said, "Look, Yogi Berra's grandchildren go to our school. Yogi Berra's coming. All we're going to have is hot dogs and beer that night. And he's not going to give a talk, but he's going to answer questions." And so he said, "Are you free?" I said, "Am I free to see Yogi Berra? Are you kidding?" So I was there with my belt. I think I was there at 4 o'clock. It was supposed to get there at 6 or 7. Anyway, so I got there, and Monsignor Guzman said, so yeah, he's going to ask questions. Oh, I know what I'm going to say on this. Dr. Bart Giamatti said talking to Yogi Berra about baseball was like talking to Homer about the gods. And all now here I'm sitting opposite Yogi Berra, and I'm looking at it, and I'm saying I remember him when I was 10 years old, wearing number 8. And the memory I remember most was in the 7th game of the World Series in 1960 when the Pirates beat the Yankees. The Yanks were losing 4-2. It was the middle of the game, and Berra hit a 3-run homer. He pulled it around the right field foul pole, and that put them ahead 5-4. And that was the game where Bill Mazeroski
Yeah,
hit the home run.
Bill Mazeroski.
And
Yep, sure.
and so I'm talking to Berra. Interestingly, though, I'm talking to him, and I said, "Mr. Berra or Yogi, whatever I called him," I said. I said, "Look, you played for the '61 Yankees. Was that the greatest team you ever had?" He says, "Wait a minute." He says, "We won 5 world championships in the '40s and the '50s in a row." So he was saying, they were good teams too. And man, he knew this baseball. I mean, just off the top of his
Yeah,
head.
yeah.
That was the one time I met him. And the other time, I don't know if I mentioned this to you, but these are two absolutely true stories. Colonel Mike Huber, I'd mentioned before, and I and another colonel went to the museum, the Yogi Berra Museum, with a bunch
Yep.
of cadets. Ted Williams had just died. Yogi Berra was there, and he was shown around. Of course, they didn't charge the cadets or anything. So I'm standing next to Yogi Berra, again, always in awe. And I said, "By the way, Mr. Berra, did you keep in touch with Ted Williams? Had you kept in touch with him?" He looked at me and he said, "Yeah, when he was alive." I swear he said that to me.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you keep in touch when he was alive? And the other thing, a couple of minutes later, I asked him if he thought that Gil Hodges would get into the Hall of Fame. And he said, "Yeah, if he gets enough votes." And that was it. I mean, I just, what a
Yeah,
great, great man.
yeah. But just turning how I found you, I guess I went to Yogi Berra Museum and look at some of their events, and then you have an event coming up on Sunday.
Yes, sir.
So, how did just talk a little bit about the background on that event, and then how did you kind of stay in contact with the
Right.
Berra family?
Yeah, well, the time that I met Yogi Berra and settled in Monsignor Guzman's parish, his son Larry was with him, and I met Larry and I said hello to him. So I had met Larry once. I remember telling Larry, I said, "Yeah, I shook Yogi's hand," and I said, and he was an old man, and his hand was like a vice. I mean, it was unbelievable.
Yeah.
So I talked with Larry a little bit, but I didn't know Larry. Anyway, I get a call from the archdiocese. One of our cemeteries is in it's the Gate of Heaven Cemetery in East Hanover, which is not part of the Newark Archdiocese geographically, but it is one of our cemeteries. Well, Yogi Berra is buried there, and one of the managers there, a guy by the name of Max, really good guy. He called me, said, "Father, look, here's what we're doing. We want to have an interview of Larry Berra at the cemetery. Would you be willing to do it?" I said, "Yeah, I'd be honored to." And there was absolutely no preparation at all for this. You got just two guys talking baseball. We had no preparation. I bumped into him about 10 minutes before we began. And it was like I knew this guy all my life.
Yeah.
So we're sitting at that. Now we're both the same age. We're both Italian. We're both anyway. So we're sitting down, and the questions just came, and they were coming, and Larry answered, and it was like I was interviewing him. But when this other thing came up about the Yogi Berra Museum on the 29th, I guess that they're putting that at the end of Lindsay Berra's great work. I think it was a two-part show, and I've seen most of it. What a professional, what a pro. She is absolutely great. And the story about Yogi's marriage, his being a parent, a Yankee, a Catholic, the whole thing. It's just amazing.
Yeah, and that's going to be on Sunday at 2 p.m. And where could
Yes.
people find tickets for that?
I think if you go online, I think that you can get tickets through online. In fact, I was just on the computer early this
Okay.
morning. And yeah, they
All
can
right.
do it.
Well, I'll see if I can
Oh,
put that on the show note.
initially there was a mistake. It said Saturday the 29th, but it's Sunday the 29th.
Okay. And then if anybody hasn't ever been to that Yogi Berra Museum, I mean, talk about it. It really is, it really is a nice day trip. I mean, there's a lot there. They do have special events. So, I mean, it really is
Yeah.
it really has a lot of baseball history, especially Yogi Berra in the museum. So,
Yeah, it's a yeah. I mean, he's a national treasure.
yeah. Yeah.
He
And he served our country too. So he was served the D-Day and everything else. So, I mean,
was well, sir. Let me tell you a quick story about that.
sure.
I know that there's been an effort to try to get a Purple Heart, and for Yogi, he was injured. It was either on D-Day or the very next day, but he didn't want any publicity because of his mother in
Okay.
the United States. Now, believe it or not, by some unbelievable quirk, I I was dealing with an elderly man who was also in the Navy, big Yankee fan. He's over 100 years old, and he was there as well. And he was in the Navy. So I was talking to him because all the Berra people need is just uh, one witness, and they could get this. But this gentleman I spoke to, he just said, "Look," he said, "I'm a big Yankee fan. I know Yogi Berra is, but I did not see him
Yeah.
that day." But what's the probability of having two people? It's just amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Very true. But so you're going to be finishing up at West Point. Are you going back to Seton Hall, or
Yes. Yeah.
so are you
Yeah.
going to be
Yeah. I'm
teaching?
I'll be 77. Well, I'm 77 now. I'll retire. So what I will do, I'll teach a math course every now and then, and every now and then I might teach a course in the School of Theology, maybe a course on St. Francis,
Okay.
and then maybe do a little writing and stuff. But it's been a great life as a priest. I've been very, very fortunate to have the family I had. Uh, my brother and I are very close. He's the smart one. I got the
Okay.
hair. I got the
Okay.
hair. He got the
Hey,
brains.
Okay.
But he's amazing.
Well,
And
listen, Father. I really appreciate the time, and we wanted to do this earlier. I mean, I unfortunately had a personal loss in my family, and I
right,
reached out to you, and you said a mass for my mother-in-law. So
yes,
I'm
sir.
I'm forever grateful
Okay,
for you to do that. And as a matter of person that you are, and also a priest. So I
my
really
pleasure.
appreciate that, and I appreciate the time. And if anybody wants to learn more about this, it's going to be on Sunday at Yogi Berra Museum. But thank you for your your background on Yogi Berra and Babe Ruth. I mean, and just their dedication to the game, and basically just being a true follower. As far as a true leader. So I really appreciate the
Well,
time,
thank you,
Father.
sir. It's been an honor. And I hope our paths cross in the future if I can ever help in any way.
Well,
Please.
yeah, definitely, definitely. But I appreciate it, Father, and we'll definitely keep in touch. So we're gonna try to
Oh,
make it on Sunday. I got to see
okay.
what's going on with the family. But thank you, Father. I really
Okay.
appreciate the time, and
Thank you, sir.
and thank you for the mass too. I really do.
Okay.
But this
My
is going to be
pleasure.
episode 56. We're always produced by Chop Sports Media,
Okay.
Dave Sturcio. But this is going to be episode 56 in the books. I look forward to future episodes coming soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day. God bless.
Yeah.
Bye
All
bye.
right. Thank you, Father.
Bye bye.